The Heinz Beans scandal, are Brits paying £2 for nothing? For decades, it's been a British classic. A tin in almost every cupboard. A comfort food millions trust without thinking twice. But what if I told you that the beans inside that famous blue tin might not be what you think they are? What if the product many Brits are now paying £2 a tin for is almost identical to versions costing less than half the price, same beans, similar ingredients, yet a dramatically higher price? So what exactly are consumers paying for? Is it quality, is it branding, or is it simply clever marketing? Tonight, we investigate the story behind one of Britain's most iconic foods, because when you look closely at the numbers, the ingredients, and the industry secrets, you start to ask a very uncomfortable question: are Brits paying £2 for nothing? And the answer might surprise you. Baked beans are more than just food in the UK. They're a national institution. From full English breakfasts, to quick student dinners, to late-night toast after a long day, Brits eat millions of tins every week, and for generations, one brand has dominated supermarket shelves: the legendary Heinz Baked Beans. Trusted, familiar, iconic. But recently, something has changed. Prices have climbed, consumers are noticing, and critics are asking difficult questions. Why are Heinz Beans now approaching £2 per tin in some supermarkets, when store brands sell for 50p or less? Are they truly better, or are customers paying for a reputation built decades ago? To answer that question, we dug deep. We looked at ingredient, manufacturing, food industry practices, and consumer testing, and what we discovered reveals a story most shoppers never see. A story of branding power, supermarket economics, and the psychology of trust. But before we get to the biggest revelation, there's one thing you need to understand, because the real secret of baked beans starts long before they reach the supermarket shelf. Section 1. The power of the brand. Walk into almost any UK supermarket, and you'll see the same thing: rows of baked beans, but one brand almost always dominates the display: the unmistakable blue label of Heinz. For more than a century, the company has positioned itself as the gold standard of baked beans, and it worked. Brand loyalty in Britain is incredibly strong. Many shoppers simply assume Heinz must be better. But here's where things get interesting. When blind taste tests are conducted, the results often surprise people. In several consumer studies, shoppers couldn't reliably tell the difference between premium beans and supermarket-owned brands. Sometimes they even preferred the cheaper versions, which raises an uncomfortable question: if people can't consistently taste the difference, why does the price gap keep growing? To answer that, we had to look deeper. Because the truth isn't just about taste. It's about how baked beans are actually made, and that's where the story takes an unexpected turn. What's really inside the tin? The ingredients list for baked beans is surprisingly simple. Beans, tomatoes, sugar, salt, spices, that's it. Whether you buy a premium brand or a supermarket version, the core ingredients are often remarkably similar. In fact, many baked beans across the UK use the exact same variety of haricot beans, grown in North America. These beans are shipped across the Atlantic, processed in factories, and then canned. So the raw material, often identical. Of course, brands may tweak their sauce recipes: some add slightly more sugar, some adjust the tomato content. Others add flavor enhancers. But nutritionally speaking, the differences are usually minor, which leads to another uncomfortable question: if the ingredients are similar, and the beans themselves come from the same sources, why are some tins 4 times more expensive than others? The answer lies in something far more powerful than ingredients: brand perception, and the food industry knows exactly how to use it. But that's only part of the story. Because behind the scenes, another factor is quietly influencing what you pay, and it's happening in every supermarket aisle in Britain. The supermarket pricing game. Supermarket pricing is rarely simple. In fact, many experts say it's more like a psychological strategy. Premium brands like Heinz often sit at the top of the price ladder. Their high price creates a perception of higher quality. Then supermarket-owned brand beans appear beside them, at a much lower price. Suddenly those cheaper tins look like a bargain. But here's the twist. Supermarkets and brands often work together on promotional cycles. One week the price is £1.80. The next week it drops to £1. Then it climbs again. To the shopper, it feels like a special deal, but economists say this strategy encourages customers to believe the product is worth more than it actually costs to produce. In reality, baked beans are relatively cheap to manufacture, which is why discount brands can sell them for a fraction of the price and still make a profit. But the biggest revelation in our investigation came when we looked at consumer behavior, because what people believe about food often matters more than the food itself. And that belief can be incredibly powerful. The psychology of food. Trust. Food isn't just about taste. It's about trust. For generations, British families have grown up with Heinz Baked Beans on their tables. Parents served them, children loved them. That familiarity creates something psychologists call brand security. It feels safe, reliable, comforting. Even if a cheaper product is nearly identical, many consumers still reach for the familiar label. Because subconsciously they think, if it's been around this long, it must be better. But when consumers are shown blind comparisons, that confidence often disappears. In some tests, people choose supermarket beans over premium ones without knowing it, only to change their opinion once they see the label, which reveals something fascinating. Sometimes, the brand changes the taste in our minds. Not the beans themselves. But the story doesn't end there. Because the rising cost of living is forcing many shoppers to rethink their choices, and that's changing the baked bean market in ways the industry didn't expect. The cost of loyalty. Over the past few years, food prices across the UK have risen dramatically. Households are feeling the pressure. And suddenly, shoppers are asking questions they never asked before. Do I really need the premium brand? Is the expensive tin actually better? Or am I simply paying for a logo? Sales data from supermarkets suggests something surprising. More shoppers are now switching to store-brand baked beans. Not because they want to, but because they are discovering something unexpected. The cheaper versions are perfectly fine, sometimes nearly identical. For decades, premium brands relied on loyalty, but in a time of rising prices, loyalty can quickly turn into scrutiny. And scrutiny leads to something brands fear most: consumers starting to question the value. So where does that leave the humble baked bean? And what should shoppers actually do? The answer may be simpler than you think. Point 6. Solutions are smart choices. If there's one lesson from this investigation, it's this: price doesn't always equal quality. When it comes to baked beans, there are a few simple tips that can save you money. First, compare ingredient lists. Many supermarket brands use almost identical ingredients to premium tins. Second, try blind taste tests at home. You might be surprised which beans you prefer. Third, watch for supermarket promotions. If you love a particular brand, buying during discounts can dramatically reduce the cost. And finally, don't assume the most expensive product is automatically the best, because sometimes, the difference between a £2 tin and a 60p tin is mostly the label on the outside. 7. Powerful OUTRO. The story of baked beans might seem small, but it reveals something much bigger about the modern food industry. The power of branding, the psychology of trust, and the hidden forces shaping what we buy every day. For over a century, Heinz Baked Beans have been a British icon, and for many people, they always will be. But the next time you reach for that familiar blue tin, you might pause for a moment and ask yourself a simple question. Am I buying better beans, or just a better brand? Because sometimes the biggest secrets in the supermarket aisle are hiding in plain sight. If you found this investigation interesting, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who loves baked beans. And remember, the next time you go shopping, look a little closer at what's really inside the tin. The factory behind the beans. Most people imagine baked beans being cooked in small batches with carefully guarded recipes. But the reality is very different. Modern baked beans are produced in massive industrial facilities. Gigantic vats. Automated filling lines. Thousands of tins every hour. Factories producing beans for Heinz and other companies operate at an incredible scale. In fact, a single facility can produce millions of tins every week. The process usually follows the same steps. First, dried haricot beans arrive in huge shipments. They are soaked in water for hours. Then partially cooked under pressure. Next comes the sauce, a mixture of tomato paste, sugar, vinegar, salt, and spices. The beans and sauce are combined, sealed in tins, and cooked again inside the can to sterilize the product. The result? A shelf life that can last years. But here's the surprising part. Many of these processes are nearly identical across different brands. Which raises another intriguing question. If the production methods are so similar, what exactly makes one tin worth 3 or 4 times more than another? The answer lies partly in something called food marketing strategy. And it's far more powerful than most people realize. 9. The marketing machine. Marketing experts know something very important about human psychology. People rarely buy products purely based on ingredients. They buy stories. And few brands have built a stronger story than Heinz. For generations, their baked beans have been advertised as the original, the best. Beans means Heinz. That famous slogan became one of the most recognizable advertising campaigns in British history. And it worked. Even today, many shoppers instinctively associate the brand with quality and tradition. But advertising doesn't just shape opinions. It shapes expectations. When consumers believe a product is premium, they often perceive it as tasting better, even if the recipe is similar to cheaper alternatives. This phenomenon is known in psychology as the expectation effect. The label influences the experience. Which means branding alone can change how people judge food. But the marketing story goes even deeper. Because baked beans aren't just about taste or nostalgia. They are also about national identity. 10. Why Brits love baked beans. Few foods are as closely tied to British culture as baked beans. They are a staple of the full English breakfast. They appear on toast in homes across the country. And they are often one of the first meals young people learn to cook. This cultural connection is incredibly powerful. When food becomes part of a national identity, people rarely question it. It simply becomes normal. But ironically, baked beans themselves aren't originally British at all. The dish evolved from recipes brought to Britain from North America. Over time, the sauce changed. The flavor became sweeter. And eventually, baked beans became a uniquely British comfort food. Brands like Heinz helped cement that tradition. But today, the baked bean market is changing faster than ever before. And the next shift could reshape supermarket shelves completely. 11. The rise of supermarket brands. In the past, supermarket own-brand foods were often seen as cheap and inferior. But modern food production has changed that. Today, many supermarket products are produced in the same factories as branded goods. Sometimes even using similar recipes. Retailers like Tesco, Sainsbury's, Aldi, Lidl have invested heavily in improving their store brand products. And shoppers are noticing. In blind taste tests, some supermarket baked beans now score as highly as premium brands. Yet they can cost less than half the price. For families struggling with rising grocery bills, that difference matters a lot. But the shift isn't just about saving money. It's also changing the balance of power in the food industry. Because when consumers start questioning premium prices, brands are forced to respond. And sometimes, that response reveals even more about how the industry works. 12. The price question no one can ignore. So let's return to the original question. Why are some baked beans approaching £2 per tin? Part of the answer is inflation. Ingredients, shipping, and energy costs have all increased. But analysts say another factor plays a role. Brand positioning. Premium brands often keep prices high intentionally. Why? Because lowering the price too much can damage the perception of quality. In other words, the product isn't expensive because it's better. Sometimes it's seen as better because it's expensive. And that perception can be incredibly difficult to change. But as more consumers experiment with cheaper alternatives, that belief is slowly being challenged. Which means the baked bean aisle may never look the same again. 13. Final thought, what should you do? So, should you stop buying premium baked beans entirely? Not necessarily. If you genuinely prefer the taste of Heinz, there's nothing wrong with sticking to what you enjoy. But the key takeaway from this investigation is simple. Don't assume. Compare. Experiment. Taste different brands. Read the labels. Because when it comes to everyday foods like baked beans, the most expensive option isn't always the best one. And sometimes the biggest surprise in the supermarket aisle is discovering how little difference there really is. Final OUTRO: the next time you walk into a supermarket and see that familiar blue tin, you'll know there's more to the story. Behind the branding. Behind the advertising. Behind the tradition. There's a complex world of marketing, psychology, and pricing strategies shaping what we buy. So the real question isn't just about baked beans. It's about how we choose the food we trust.